The US government, under the watch of Donald Trump, through the State Department, have expressed deep concern over the killings of Christians in Nigeria. When you see the current events and trending issues bordering on the killings of Christians in Nigeria, which some persons have expressed deep worry and concern over the lackadaisical attitude or ineptitudeness on the part of Nigeria to quell the tide of insurgency and targeted killings on the Christian populations and community across different regions of Nigeria. According to the report published by People's Gazette, that Nigeria accounts for 90% of killings of Christians globally. This is quite a very unfortunate development and a very sad news that the killings of Christians globally in Nigeria account for 90% of the killings of Christians, according to People's Gazette reports. And the US Congress clears Trump to impose crippling sanctions on Nigeria over the killings of Christians. For decades, this has been going on unnoticed by the international communities, even while people, indigenous communities, affected Christian population and communities are raising concerns. There have been uproar, protests, demanding for justice and decisiveness and political will on the part of the government to address this unfortunate development that have taken lives. Several communities has been sacked, and yet the perpetrators of this heinous crime have not been brought to justice. This have drawn the attention of Mr. Donald Trump and his administration that is committed to religious tolerance and has vowed to address this matter as an issue of global concern, citing several killings, bombardments, and raiding of churches, burning down of churches, killing of indigenous communities, predominantly Christians, have triggered serious panic in Asrock as Tinubu convenes a state of emergency meeting that will be observed on Thursday. National Security Tinubu convenes emergency meeting for the state council meeting to be held on Thursday. It is quite interesting with such development. Tinubu on condolence visit to Plateau State made a very striking development, trying to exonerate himself from whatever purported news and trending issues in the social media as international communities begin to pour out their frustration and bitterness over the continued, unabating massacring of Christian communities in Nigeria, including the Igbo people, the minority ethnic nationalities that are being brought to the point of extinction or being threatened on daily basis. It is quite an interesting development, honestly. And now the attention of the global community is now shifting from Gaza to Nigeria. And this will be a very important turning point in Nigerian history as the international community's development and focus on Nigeria unsettles Asorok. There is serious panic and, of course, fire on the mountain. And Tinubu, expressing that his background does not encourage religious intolerance. And he has been accused that with the promotion of Muslim ticket, it was targeted against Christian population to be subjugated. This possibly do not go down with his re-election bid, and the US congressmen are calling already for Donald Trump to sanction Nigeria. And any moment from now, there could be some stringent sanctions imposed on Nigeria because the US congressman has briefed Mr. President on the resurgence and escalations of this genocidal move against the Christian population, which fortunately there abounds evidence to this massacring where even people are being rounded up and burnt alive. It's a very disturbing development. And sad to note, the perpetrators of this heinous crime aren't brought to justice, which is to a greater extent alleged to be, uh, a conspiracy of silent by the government, most especially the government of Buhari. It is well pronounced, and this tempo has been sustained. And this has raised concerns. Why should over 18 churches, 18,000 churches be burnt, and yet there is no repercussion? There is no action, decisive action taken by the government to foster further actions, attacks. We see mob actions driven by religious sentiments or motivated uh, killings in recent years, and the rest of them. All of this evidence compounded where the likes of Deborah, the likes of Leah, of course, was killed on the basis of religious sentiments and inclinations. It is quite unacceptable and very unfortunate, whatever be the case. So there is no point of denying the realities. What the government possibly could do was to find a lasting solution to this and bring the perpetrators of this heinous crime to justice. They haven't been brought to justice. Justice have not served. Over It's been alleged over 500,000 Christians has been killed, and the countless of them beheaded. Of course, you are aware of this. This is before the public domain. Some said 100,000 and above, and the rest of them, whether it is 1,000 or 500 people or 20 people, do they deserve such cruelty, such level of cruelty on the basis of their religious affiliations? These are questions, of course, Tinubu has to answer as the attention of the US government has shifted to address this injustice and purported genocide or target against the Christian population. Well, whatever happens or be the outcome of this emergency meeting, executive council meeting, it's immaterial, but what Nigerians are seeking is for peace, which outside of this, there can be progress or development. And eventually, the world is becoming a global village that you can't do something and hide under the carpet. Nigerians are being monitored by international observers, and the social media has been described as the Sultan of Sokoto as a terrorist organization, possibly because they are exposing the atrocities that is going on, and sadly, most of these clerics or leaders or political leaders and traditional rulers are not speaking up. They are not condemning such dastard act. Imagine the killing of over 200 persons in a single day. There was no strong criticism or condemnation coming from the northern part of the country. But when the Uromi 16 ensued, you saw where everybody was agog. From the north, you see them convening emergency meeting and the rest of them demanding for justice for the slain 16 persons. But here comes over 200 died and more to that, burnt alive, and the rest of them, there was no any voice of concern raised or speaking against such from the northern part of the country. What does that suggest? And sadly, majority, the assailants, the killers, weren't brought to justice even when the president was on a visit to Benue State. He asked a silent question: What were the assailants or the killers of these people brought to justice? Were they arrested, let alone being brought to justice or allowed justice to take its course? The response he got was very embarrassing and shocking. Do you mean in a country that has institutions of the state saddled with the responsibility of protecting life and properties of Nigerians, with all this massacre, raiding, onslaught, none of the perpetrators of this heinous crime were cited or even arrested? What an irony of a state. It is quite very disturbing. Now, what will take the next line of action as US are showing concern over this? Definitely, they are not going back. If Donald Trump eventually admit the position, of course, it is well spread out with evidence, overwhelming evidence to attest to that. Nigeria might be sanctioned. I know the implication of that. The main source of revenue, which is the oil explorations and, of course, other means, will be crippled in the course of that sanction once Nigeria is being enlisted as country of particular concern. Then it means more economic problem for Nigeria, and the viability of the state will be uncertain, honestly, and hopefully there could be an escalation of another humanitarian crisis as outposts of people, the anger is raging, and people are beginning to think, what kind of life is this? How do we continue in such state of servitude in the supposed country we call our own? We can no longer live without fear of being killed or overrun. It's quite unfortunate, but these are realities. Well, some persons might argue that Mazen Nnamdi Kanu said it decades ago. Well, that will not be far from the reality. He said it. And today, the lives of the district heads or traditional rulers in Borno states, somebody described it as hallucinating from Cameroon, could tell Nigerians that he has no other option than to flee as a district head of Brunei, of course, dynasty or region. Even people are now fleeing their countries, fleeing their own ancestral homes because of the renewed and ever-growing insurgency and attack on the host communities. It is quite unfortunate. Mazen Nandukano said it, but the same people who are now fleeing from Boko Haram are the same people demanding that Mazen Nandukano should remain under incarceration, even when an appellate court of law has given a standing injunction, of course, of verdict, declaring Mazen Nandukano not guilty, innocent, discharged and acquitted. Yes, they are whipping up sentiments. Why Mazen Nandukano said, the more you fight the people of God, the Biafrans who agitated for secession, the more the enemies, the external forces, the Boko Haram, overrun your communities, take over your land. By the time you know it, you will run and scurry for safety in a different country. You become aliens, refugees, losing your ancestral home. These are prophecies or predictions that are accurate, and this is happening in real time and could no longer be denied. These are realities of our time, and possibly they may have reflected over Mazen Nnamdi Kanu statement made several or about a decade plus, but The current reality is staring at everyone today. We want to have your own take regarding this development. Definitely, there are issues bordering on continued existence of Nigeria, which several persons has been calling for this to be reviewed. That the way Nigeria is being structured, the endless bloodletting, does not suggest we have a government, perhaps, that does not prioritize the protection and safety of Nigerians. Otherwise, you can't be middling and talking, romancing with the assailant, the Boko Haram, the terrorists, the bandit campaign, or whatever they are called, whatever name they are being given. But we understand they are on a mission to kill, to steal, and to destroy what belongs to the indigenous communities. But sadly, there appears to be collaboration of silence or ineptitude on the part of the political class, who, for whatever economic or monetary benefit or inducement, have remained indifferent over the plight. But it's getting at everyone now. The district traditional rulers are fleeing, and people could no longer stay back. This is no longer target against the Christians or vulnerable population, but the political heavyweights could no longer walk free without fear of being victimized. It is very unfortunate. These are realities we are trapped in, and virtually everybody is feeling the heat. What is uncertain, of course, whether there could be any future for this country, because the victims of today were once the survivors of yesterday. Now, what could guarantee the continued existence of Nigeria under this current configuration and with this escalation of insecurity? Possibly, United Nations and the U.S. governments might be seeking to end this tide of wave of killings through conducting referendum for people to decide where they belong, as the Nigerian Constitution recognizes freedom of expression and political affiliation, which means people have the right to freely choose who they want to associate with. And this has been expressed by the renewed quest for agitation, which has remained a growing ideology and which cannot be silenced even with the use of kinetics and intimidations. But the reality are staring at us as people continue to call for the release of Mazen Nnamdi Kanu, unconditional release. You've seen the Nigerians Association of Nigerian Students, National Association of Nigerian Students, calling for the release, unconditional release of Mazen Nnamdi Kanu in the interest of justice, fairness, and equity. And several international communities, including the Working Group of the United Nations, has written severally to the Nigerian government, making it very clear that Mazen Nnamdi Kanu never contravened any law, that the extraordinary rendition of Mazen Nnamdi Kanu violate international laws and treaties, which Nigeria violated and could not become beneficiary of such level of illegality, and have called for the unconditional release of Mazen Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, and compensation for such abuse of his fundamental rights and privileges, and of course, torture. But sadly, such has not happened. All this evidence abounds to the fact, of course, that could judge the position of international communities over the preparedness and the political will on the part of the government or sincerity to address this state of injustice, gross violations, and abuse of the rule of law and the right of religious liberty and expression in Nigeria. Now we are to watch what becomes the next line of action, because already it's on the table of the UN, the United States of America President Donald Trump, to weigh options, and the sanctions are before him. Possibly this might be rolling out any moment from now, which possibly may have informed the reason for convening this emergency uh, state of council meeting on Thursday, which possibly will be superintended by His Excellency Ahmed Bola Tinubu as the president and the GCFR of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Let's have your own take as this awareness and campaign continue to grow and the consciousness of people, not just local, in the international domain, are being awakened and people are beginning to ask and demand for justice. And definitely, this might be the most anticipated time and moment to watch, or the time will reveal, of course, what plays out the next. But with this ever growing campaign and the pressure being mounted on Asorok, definitely that would be the defining factor, possibly the last straw that will break the camel's back. And we are tuned, of course, to bring you the updates and follow up to this development. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more political updates. Thanks for watching.